Hello, everybody. I'm George Larrimore. I appreciate you being here for Vietnam 360 on the Library Channel. On this show, we're talking with veterans of the Vietnam War and other people whose lives have been affected by the Vietnam War. And one thing we want to talk about today, or the focus of our show today, is the helicopter war, as it was often called during that time. It's the first true helicopter war that America fought, although obviously some helicopters were in use during the Korean War. But Rick Rivers is our guest today, who flew in the Marine Corps in helicopters, and he flew in fixed-wing planes as well. But I was about to say you're an ex-Marine, but there really is no such thing.
No ex-Marines, we're former Marines.
All right. Rick, we were talking earlier, and you're telling me you were a military brat.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about your life.
Holy halibut. I went to 12 schools before the 6th grade, and then high school in Northern California, college in Oklahoma, 21 years in the Marine Corps, and 28 years with FedEx. And in the Marine Corps, I was very blessed to have a tour in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot for 13 months, and got back as an A4 pilot for 8 months. So I was able to see two different sides of the war.
Now you're saying you're a military brat. Your dad was in the military.
My dad was an Air Force engineer on a C-97, and he was lost at sea going from Hickam, Hawaii to Kwajalein Atoll, and they were just lost at sea, a crew of 7. And they don't know ever what happened to them.
But that had an impact, obviously, on your life.
I mean, that's why I joined the Marine Corps, so I could grow up and get a little more discipline. Yes, sir.
Tell me how you told me earlier, but I'd like you to tell again, if you would, tell our audience, please, how you happened to end up being a helicopter pilot the first time around.
First time around, I went to flight school, and my instructor said, "You're going to be a helicopter pilot." And I said, "I don't want to be a helicopter pilot. I want to be a jet pilot. Everyone that's cool is a jet pilot." And he said, "Too bad, so sad, son. You're going to be a helicopter pilot." And he gave me grades accordingly. And then, because we needed them, it took 12 months to train a helicopter pilot and 18 months to train a jet pilot. And so if you had a class of 14 pilots, the top 3 or 4 with grades would go to jets. And we were halfway done with our tour when these guys are coming overseas.
Now, if you would, explain to our audience that you said something there. You said they needed helicopter pilots. Explain what the helicopter's function was, the primary functions of the helicopter crew and the pilot during the Vietnam War.
Well, I think during the Vietnam War, our primary objective was medevacs. We probably flew 70% of our missions, at least our squadron flew 70% of missions, and I presume other ones. We're talking about medium helicopters. We're not talking about Hueys, which are gunships, but our helicopters flew 70% medevacs and probably 20% resupply and 10% VIP missions. And the rest of them we were doing maintenance check flights. But yes, we flew mostly medevac, and I don't care what the Navy says about flying off an aircraft carrier. Flying a nighttime medevac in Vietnam was scary.
Again, most of our audience is going to know what a medevac is, but explain to our audience, please, when you say a medevac, tell us what the circumstances are that you're in as a pilot and as a crew.
Okay, as a pilot, we'd be either airborne or back in the ready room waiting to be called. We'd be called out to the helicopter, start it up, and fly 3, 7, 10, 15 miles to a point nearby where the medevac was being called in. And we would get a brief on the zone, and during that brief we'd find out how many medevacs we had potentially, and how many were routine, how many were priority, and how many were emergency. And of course our helicopter could only handle 2 or 3 Marines, so we would take emergencies always, even if we had to have a 4th one. But we would then go in from about 1,500 feet, 1,000 feet, swoop in, land, and go the opposite direction from where the fire was taking place. So the zones were 50% of the time hot, we were being shot at. And the scary part was that not worried about ourselves, we were more worried about the guy who got hurt, the Marines that got hurt. And we would have a crew chief, a gunner firing M60 machine guns, and a corpsman who was giving first aid until we could get him to the battalion aid station. And so we do just like an EMT picking an ambulance picking up in a car wreck. What you would do is get immediate first aid, stop the bleeding, and get them secured till they got to the battalion aid station. And then they would have the doctors be able to take care of them.
Let me go back to when you arrived in Vietnam, and if you would tell us about your first flight on a helicopter.
Well, of course, we had flown helicopters for our training, but that helicopter, the pilot and co-pilot would sit up 10 feet above the ground, and then below that, within a couple feet of the ground, is where the floor was of the helicopter. And so when we got to Da Nang, they processed us through the administrative chain of command there, and we got sent to Phu Bai, which was probably 100 miles north of Da Nang, I'm guessing 100 miles. And we got to ride in an H-34. Well, we'd never ridden an H-34 before, and first of all, the place was very hot, very humid. It stank. It wasn't very much fun to ride, and we were a little curious about being able falling out because the door wasn't there. There was no door. It was like the Huey, except this was a dead-gum transport helicopter. And we flew 1,500 feet off the ground, and you could see the roads, and you could see trucks, and you could see people, and it was a rude awakening that you're in the war now, son, and we were.
Tell us a little bit about the helicopter itself, the H-34. How big was it? How fast would it fly? How many people would it hold, etc.?
Well, the 34 was a medium transport helicopter, and it had, I would say, the main floor portion was probably 4 or 5 feet wide and maybe about 8 feet long. But you had a gunner that was in the back left with the windows out. We had no windows. We had 3 windows on that side, but that's where he was. Had a crew chief that maintained the airplane. And then we sat up above them. So the crew chief could hit the heels of our boots and yell at us, and we'd talk to them. Of course, we had headsets. Now, we had an engine, an old reciprocating engine, a 9-cylinder reciprocating engine, big bulbous thing in front of us. And it was like a wall of protection. I mean, you could take a lot of fire into the engine and even knock out a couple cylinders, but you could still fly the helicopter. So there was some security there. We had a little thin piece of metal between us and the window, but that was, and we wore flak jackets, helmet and flak jackets. And the problem with the H-34 is that it was a helicopter designed by Sikorsky, and Sikorsky didn't make helicopters. Helicopters shouldn't fly. Aerodynamically, they should not fly. It's amazing how helicopters fly at all because they have so many moving parts. We had a 52-foot diameter blades. Each one was 26 feet, and it was probably about
2 blades or 3?
4.
4. Okay.
We had 4 blades.
All right.
And we had, they were 18, maybe 20 inches wide, and they were aluminum. And what makes them difficult is that helicopter, you had to constantly keep the blades in parallel. And how you kept them in parallel is that you had to, the way they did it in Vietnam is you put grease marks on the tips of the blades, red, black, orange, green, and then you'd start the helicopter up engage the blades, and they put a dead gum bungee cord, just like you buy at the store now, on a tent pole with hooks, so it was off, and they would just bring the dead gum tent peg with the bungee cord so it would touch the tips. And you could see that 3 of the colors are within limits and 1 was out. So we'd shut it down, the mechanic get up there and raise that blade up on a fulcrum up there, so all the blades would cross in an area about the size of your 4 fingers.
Otherwise, it would, if it was out of alignment, it would shake the plane to pieces.
Well, it's called ground resonance, and it could do that even if they were in line. If when you landed hard, at the time they had narrower gear, and if you landed too hard in getting ground resonance, there's 2 things you did. Either pull the helicopter back up so that you got out of ground resonance, or you put the rotor brake on to stop it from rotating. On the USS Okinawa, one of my dear friends, was taking off.
Now that's a carrier.
That's a carrier, yes, sir. The USS Okinawa. It's an LPH from World War II. It's a straight deck carrier that we were on. Now, they came back to spot 7, the very most aft spot, and when they touched down, they got into ground resonance. The crew chief steps out of the helicopter. I was standing 20 feet away in the netting on the edge of the ship, so I saw it person. He steps out, and the thing starts beating itself off. The tail flew off. The gunner we talked about earlier was back there. He went flying over the top of the flight deck into the water 60 feet down. Now, we rescued him. The 2 pilots were as far apart as we are right now, and they kept butting heads. This all happened in 12, 14 seconds, and it disintegrated. Everyone was saved, except these guys had black eyes and didn't get to fly for a couple days. But the Navy just pushed it off into the Pacific Ocean because it couldn't recover it.
Yeah.
So ground resonance is not a good thing for helicopters.
If you would, tell me if you can remember this specific thing. The first time that you got called on a medevac, the first time that you were standing down, you were waiting someone, and obviously there were medevacs going on all the time, or
yes,
virtually all the time, because
day
you're
and
responding
night
to combat day and night.
Yes, sir.
What was your first experience like flying into combat?
Well, of course, you had to have some experience, and you got to fly with an experienced guy till you had, I want to say 100 hours under your belt, because it takes experience to do this. So the first time you fly, you're flying as co-pilot, and flying helicopter medevac, both people, both the pilot and the co-pilot, would ride the controls together in case someone got shot. So you don't get to sit there and be on an autopilot. You have to be riding the controls with him, even though he's turning and dodging bullets or as he gets lower to the ground. So the first night medevac was scary. It was scary. You couldn't focus. You didn't know where we were going. You didn't know who was talking to you on the headsets. And all you're doing is along for the ride, trying to pay attention and take notes, because within another month, you're going to be in charge of that helicopter and the 3 other people or 4 other people that you're responsible for. And that's a big responsibility. And we took it that way. Helicopter pilots, like some jet pilots, were very competitive, very motivated, and were mission-oriented. Now, having flown jets, too, like putting bombs where they're supposed to go, but it's nothing like flying a helicopter to get and save someone's life or limbs. That was very dynamic.
That must have been big in your thoughts at every time.
Well, it is big, but it is big when you look back on it. At the time, your goal is like a quarterback throwing the ball down the field, is to get the ball to the wide receiver. Your goal is you take off, get all the information you can where you're going to, find out about the I'll tell you something that was interesting on day medevac. So I was telling you, we'd take off and go the 4, 5, 6 miles to wherever we needed to go, and we'd stay in a hover find a circle above the ground 1,000 feet and talk to them. Okay, go ahead and pop a smoke. And they would pop a smoke. And they
now
said
that's a smoke grenade to mark where
they were.
All right.
And they would pop. I said, we're popping a yellow smoke. And you're looking around, then you spot the yellow smoke, not quite where you thought, but right over there. So you go in, do your job. Well, the North Vietnamese got clever to that, and whenever they said they were going to pop a smoke, a hand grenade smoke.
And they're listening on the radio.
They're listening on our radios. And they had the green smoke grenades, yellow smoke grenades, and they would pop at the same time. The unit was asking, we were asking for a smoke grenade. And so you'd have two different smokes 50 yards apart. So that was a little curious then, because they would tell, the Marine unit would tell us, no, not that one there, this one over here. So we knew to bring fire at those guys and come this way to avoid the where the enemy was. So smoke, they pop a smoke, and we would say what color we're seeing, and they say that's the right one. Mm-hmm. So that was that helped that. But that was by experience. I mean, you didn't get that in school, right, saying you're supposed to pop a smoke to where the guy is so you can find the guy. But the experience was you pop a smoke and let the helicopter pilot tell you it's a green, red, or yellow smoke.
The 13 months I was in Vietnam, and you and I, as we talked, I was also in the Marine Corps. We had a great appreciation for what the helicopter crews did, the medevacs specifically, to getting guys out of combat quickly and get them treated quickly. One thing I think that a lot of people don't understand, or it's a little hard to understand until you've been told about it, there's two things. One is that a helicopter is not designed to be shot at. It's very, very thin, the skin on the helicopter. And when you are landing, when you're taking off, you're moving very, very slowly. So you were an easy target. Is that right?
Perfect. Our helicopters were made with magnesium. For those of you who had high school science, you take a strip of magnesium and light it, and it go up. It wouldn't blow up, but it would burn up. So what's nice about magnesium, it's very light, and if you got the helicopter shot, had holes in it, you can make little patches of magnesium about the size of a quarter or a dime or a nickel and glue it back on, so you'd have an airplane that still functioned as opposed
with a bunch of Band-Aids on
it. With a bunch of Band-Aids on it. Yes. Now, a helicopter, for a little aerodynamics, ours was 52 feet. The diameter of the blades was 52 feet. So a helicopter, when it picks up, it generates so much air underneath the helicopter, it forms a bubble of air. So aerodynamically, if you're going straight up, when you get to the 26 feet of the bubble of air, you get above that a foot, and you're hovering out of ground effect. If you're in the bubble of air, you're hovering in ground effect. So if you had more weight than the helicopter could do, you couldn't get above ground effect because you weighed so much. So you knew to throw some resupplies out so that you could take off. Or the other way you could do it is be up on a mountain, and even though you're overweight, you pick up the helicopter and just dive over the side till you got enough air over the blades, like a straight wing. Mm-hmm. You got enough air over the blades for translational lift, and you could go flying. So a helicopter, when you see it rise within its bubble of air and it starts to go forward, you watch even on any police show where you see helicopters, they take off and they kind of roll forward and they kind of drop a little bit when they start to go forward. They're rolling off that bubble of air to go flying. That's called translational lift. Mm-hmm. So yes, that again, back to Sikorsky, helicopters aren't made to fly aerodynamically. They just have so many moving parts, they trick themselves into flying.
You mentioned to me in an earlier conversation that there was, as I recall the conversation, there was a lucky helicopter in one of the units that you flew in because it had been hit so many times.
The nickname was Patches. It had so many patches. His nickname was Patches, and we felt that that was a good luck charm because it had continued to fly, and guys wanted to be assigned that helicopter because they knew it would get back. Now, the real problem with the about being in war in outposts is that you don't have all the stuff you need to fix airplanes. And in our particular squadron, the gunnery sergeant in charge of the metal shop, who did patches on patches, and any helicopter, you got holes in the helicopter from guns, machine guns, from shrapnel from mortars, and shrapnel from artillery shells, and guys hitting it with a deadgum knife because they would. Now, so the gunnery sergeant got to know me first at Captain Rivers. You can't go inside and go get you something to eat until I see how many holes you got in your airplane this night, because you always bring back a helicopter full of holes. So he would chastise me, but we got the job done. He got the helicopter fixed, and I got to go fly again.
You were talking again just a few minutes ago about one of the not a bad part, but a kind of an unfinished part, that you rescued a lot of guys, a lot of Marines, but you never were able to find out what happened to them.
Good point, George. Two things that happened with that: the crew chief and gunner, and even the corpsman that flew with us. They were all, like I said, we sat up 4 or 5 feet higher than they were, and we never got to interchange at the chow hall because officers and staff NCOs and enlisted ate differently. They slept in different quarters, and we didn't get to exchange about our families and stuff with them very, very often. Now, when we got the case on, when we were sitting around waiting to be called out, we get to have some exchange with them. But if you got called for a medevac, you're in the ready room. The troops were out at the helicopter, and they, as soon as they heard us coming, they'd get the engine started, and we'd jump up there and go get the medevac. And the other first part of the thing that I forgot.
And we're talking about the guys you didn't get to know what happened to.
Oh, true. When you take these guys to the battalion aid stations and they would get off, and you knew after talking to the corpsman that the guy either had a chance to live, and most of the guys, I would say 75% of the time, guys had a chance to make it, even the emergency medevacs. The routine medevacs could be a KIA, but we still needed to get them away from where the troops are so they could go moving. Moving meaning on other operations. So we didn't get, I sadly have thought I recall one case where we got our we got our hydraulic system shot up. And I had to put it down in the middle of the deadgum jungle, if you will. It wasn't a true jungle, but it was a jungle enough as far as I was concerned. And I got out of the helicopter, and the corpsman said, "This guy's dead." We had called and said that we were shot down. We had 2 emergency medevacs and 1 priority on our aircraft. So when I got out, I said to the corpsman, "Well, put them on my shoulder. I see the guys are coming now." Guys came in about 7 minutes.
Another helicopter.
Another helicopter. And I put them on my shoulder, and as I was running 30 yards, all of a sudden I hear this god-awful gasp, like he got in his breath. And he was breathing again. Because when I put him on my shoulder, he wasn't breathing. So my bouncing, I'm thinking this to this day, that my bouncing helped him. And I don't know if he ever made it. But I knew that I felt when he was on my shoulder, and I was just 5 yards from the other helicopter, and he got his breath, that he was going to have a chance to live, because we were only 6-7 minutes from the Dong Hall Battalion aid station.
And you had put down. He was on The helicopter.
We were taking him out.
He was already dead. You put down in a field where you weren't supposed to be.
Correct.
You're a pilot. You're carrying him over your shoulder, which you're not supposed to be doing. So all of those things came together for that gasp of air.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the frustration is, as you asked, that there's a lot of those Marines that I'd like to have met after the fact and say that I was the guy that helped them or got them so they could make it. When I got back from Vietnam, I know we're going to talk about that some more. When I got back from Vietnam, here at Memphis, I went to the VA hospital several times because my brother was a gunner on a Huey back in Vietnam at the same time we were there. And he had a real tough time, as did the guys in the VA hospital, on how they were treated when they got back. And they had a tough time about it. And I'm trying to say that you guys can make it if you got to believe in yourself and go do it. Don't worry about what other people are saying. And that was I would like to have met more of the guys that we did save, that I saved, helped save.
If you would, and I do want to talk about what it was like for you when you came back, and to talk about your conversations with other veterans about their lives when they came back. But you did tell me something earlier about seeing how the medical, the trauma center, if that's what you want to call it, how that operated. You told me that you had one opportunity to see how it functioned. If you would tell us that. Well,
it was like being in the Civil War. I imagine the Civil War because we'd bring in 3 guys, two helicopters bringing in 6 guys, all at the same time. And they didn't know which Marine was hurt the worst and who to address first. So the way they did it, we had them on stretchers. They'd take the stretchers off and go put them on sawhorses like you'd see as barricades. They'd lay them there, 6 of them, and as soon as they laid someone down there, they took a bucket of water, splashed on them so they could see what the wound was like. Or they did have a hose that would function if they had water in the tank because they use it a lot. They'd hose the guys down and then start cutting off their utilities to see where the wounds are, even in the chest. So that was a real startling experience for me to see that this was just like the Civil War had to be. And when they were having to cut off leg to arms without the morphine and stuff, the guys were telling me that. I didn't see this when they got further into taking care of them, but when they initially take care of them and trying to identify who to work first, some of that was a tough call because 2 guys had sucking chest wounds and that they were going to die if they both didn't get treated. And the doctors on duty and the corpsmen on duty, they were drained. You'd visualize someone working 20-hour days, and that's what you'd see because these guys were doing it.
Just to make sure that our audience understands terminology, when we say a corpsman, being in the Marine Corps, corpsmen are Navy personnel. They're medical people. In the Army, they're called a medic.
Yeah, correct.
They're a first responder.
Exactly, like an EMT.
So when you're flying in that helicopter with a corpsman in there with you, and you're only going out there if somebody's killed or wounded. That's the only reason you're going out.
Correct.
There. So that corpsman has a very, very difficult job. So you knew those people well, I assume.
Well, it's just like a crew chief and the gunner. We knew them to see them, but didn't get to sit down and talk like we're talking. That was. In retrospect, that was very tough to not have a close relationship. Now, we had a flight surgeon on staff in our squadron, and he would go fly with us periodically, but the flight surgeon himself would help in our own bivouac area as opposed to the battalion aid station. But they did yeoman's work. The corpsmen and the medics in the Army side, the corpsmen were phenomenal, and that's all I can say. Except I want to add one thing about Vietnam, at least in Northern I Corps and the Marine Corps units I flew with, that we didn't have the problem that a lot of problems in the rear with the gear had with drugs. It wasn't that case up where we were from Northern I-Corps, which was Da Nang north to the DMZ, Quezon. We didn't have that exposure.
What was it? What was your life like when you were not flying? When you were in Vietnam and not flying? What was that like?
Well, trying to get sleep was probably one of the priorities. Taking cold showers, God, I don't like cold showers to this day because the 500-gallon water buffalo, when the shower wasn't operational, you'd have to just turn on a spigot and take a washcloth, naked as a jaybird, in the mud and sand, trying to clean up, and everyone laughing at you. But it was that was tough. At night, if you weren't flying night medevac, we'd play cards. We'd get a hold of beer. Now we would get a hold of Pabst Blue Ribbon. If you ever had Pabst Blue Ribbon, I'm sorry, Pabst Blue Ribbon, but it tastes like green beer, but it does the thing. It numbs you appropriately. The other thing we had to do a lot of at Quang Tri was hide from rocket attacks. We had a lot of rocket attacks. 155 rockets sounded just like the bombs in Berlin and London in World War II. You'd hear the scream, and then the thing would explode. It just looked like a rocket. It hit the ground, and the shrapnel would go flying out, and that's what you get. Guys would get hurt by the shrapnel. So we had bunkers right beside our tents, and eventually we had hooches. Hooches is plywood put together so that you had a hard floor and a hard back and a tin roof. But we built ourselves bunkers to go hide in until the rocket attack stopped. And then you'd go out and fly. As a matter of fact, sometimes guys would be called out not only to help our own self, but someone else would be hurt. So the DAS, the Direct Air Support Center, would call in need of medevacs, and we were under a rocket attack. We were going. Now, fortunately, the helicopters had revetments, which were probably 2 feet wide and probably 10 feet tall
To protect them.
to protect the helicopter from shrapnel.
Because where the helicopters were would be a prime target.
Oh, sure.
For
Absolutely.
rocket attack. How aware were you at the time of how America felt about Vietnam? Were you getting information from home, or how did you?
I didn't, but sure sensed that on the trip home, because being a military brat, I thought I was doing my duty to God and country, God first, country second, and we did a lot of good. But when we were told that we were second-class citizens when we got back, that was very frustrating and hurtful. It was very hurtful.
How did you get the message that you were a second-class citizen? How did you get that? Through the television, through people, through being ignored? What? Because I've had that conversation with a lot of people who've been on this show who felt that way.
Well, when I came back, I had we were ignored. I was never never tried to spit on me, but when they said when I would say that I was back from Vietnam, they would tell me how screwed up I was, and I said, the reason you get to live in this country is because of crazy guys like me. And the Marine, for you listening, Marines are Uncle Sam's misguided children. We are crazy, but we get the job done. And we're disciplined, and we survive because we took care of each other. It's a camaraderie that you can't explain to someone that hasn't been there. George, as you were saying, that if you've been in combat with somebody, you understand when you're smoking a cigarette or getting too drunk, and you know you got to go fly, and you got to get some sleep, and you can't eat, and you can't take a dump because you're constipated, but you got to go do the fight. You got to go do the fight, and together as a team, just like a football team. One guy can't do it. Me as the captain of the helicopter have to have that co-pilot riding controls me. Have to have the crew chief and gunner being able to shoot at the enemy when we're coming into dangerous situations. And they have to be accurate, and they have to be rested. And it's pretty tough to do. Mail. It took 10 days for mail to get home and 10 days to get back. So if you get in an argument with your wife or your girlfriend or your mom and dad, you forgive them by the time you get your letter back. They're mad at you, so you get pissed off at them. You write them another nasty letter. You get the nice, oh, I'm sorry that I... So we finally took me 6 months to tell my wife to don't say anything, because we'll stay in a fight for 3 months if it goes back and forth like that.
Again, for those who are in our audience who don't know any time before email, there was no such thing.
Oh, yeah.
Anymore. It's funny to hear you talk about, for example, any situations in which there's really no technology. You know, the way of checking the width of the blades.
Oh, yes.
Really doing it manually.
That's that.
It's hard to remember, even though it's 50 years ago. It's really, in our minds, it's really not that long.
And mail
ago.
call.
So,
mail call is just like it was in World War II. You might not hear from family or friends for a month.
Right.
And then you get 4 or 5 letters, and you might get a letter that they wrote later than when you received. Yeah. You haven't gotten the one they wrote 2 months earlier than that, because that's the way the mail got there.
Mail was a great thing. I was in hospital for about a month.
Okay.
And then when I got back to the battalion, I had literally a bag of mail. It was the greatest thing in the world. You know, you get
Christmas
cookies or summer sausage or whatever, you know, the folks back home sent you that they thought you might want.
And share, sure.
That kind of thing. And you shared it, right.
And you can use that as bartering stuff, too, with the guys.
Yeah.
You give me that beer and I'll give you some cookies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. This might be awkward for you, I don't know, but you received the Silver Star.
Yes.
Would you mind telling us? And the Silver Star is a very high commendation for.
It's the third behind Congressional, and in the Navy and Marine Corps, the Navy Cross and Silver Star. They are the only awarded in combat experiences. Only awarded combat experience.
Tell us what happened to you, when it was, where you were, and what I believe you told me you were just about to go home at that point.
Yeah, we're down at Marble Mountain, which is just south of Da Nang, and usually the last 3 weeks they didn't schedule for night medevac as lead. You could provide the wingman and provide support and flares for the lead. Well, this happened 10 days before I was due to rotate, and I was the lead, and my wingman didn't want me to fly lead because he said, "You shouldn't be doing this." I said, "No, I can go and get this guy," because we went to the Rock Marines.
You're trying to get to somebody who's wounded.
Get to someone who's wounded, the North Korean. And even though I was wingman, he went out to the Rock Marines, got the guy, and I'm waiting for him. And when he came back by, we were heading back to Marble Mountain to shut down and wait for our next call. And I heard at Hoi An that there was a shit sandwich. Excuse my language. There's a recon outpost on top of a hill on a valley fork of the rivers, and this recon could look out miles in either 2 big directions, which was important for Marines to keep track of what's going on.
Now, just to interrupt you, a recon outfit is a very small unit.
I think this recon unit was 5 guys, 6 guys, not very big, and the way the bunker was, where they stayed, and of course they'd look out through their binoculars over the area. Their helo pad to get resupply, because it was so steep that you couldn't get up there except through helos, was 55 yards away. Not far, but still far enough that that the helo could land and they could go get the resupply after you all the sea rats and mail and all the stuff you could get to them. So what we were doing, I heard them saying that they can't get to the guy because the helo pad was so far away. I said, well, sure, just I'll help. I know the area you're talking about. And we had a C-47 called, I want to say Puff the Magic Dragon, but Puff was the C-130. I think Spectre was... Spooky.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, this is an airplane that was flying, circling a target with a high-volume machine guns in it.
The Gatling guns. The Gatling guns.
Fire. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And they provide illumination if necessary. And they coordinated the artillery to provide illumination. Well, 246s tried to get in there, and they're too big to get in, and they couldn't get close enough to get these two emergency medevac, two emergency medevacs. And I said, well, I can get in there and land on top of the dead gum bunker where they are, and that way they don't have to go over to the helo pad. Well, I said, this is high boy medevac 2-1, 2-2, whatever I was, and so I found out where they were taking fire. Well, these guys were throwing hand grenades up onto the bunker, just like you see in the movies, look like a can, a tall can with a stick in it. And they would throw it, and it would bounce off the bottom of our helicopter and blow back up on them. But at the same time, we were getting shrapnel from the thing in the helicopter. And I've got one wheel. I'm not resting. I'm flying, but I got one wheel on the bunker. And the guy, they brought the two medevacs on the side of the bunker itself, where they walk, and got him into the helicopter. 3 minutes maybe. Well, that's a hell of a long time
to be sitting on the ground.
Sitting
right.
on the ground, and you see Spooky shooting all the rounds off, and these guys bouncing off, and my guys. The gunner on the one side was shooting. The crew chief wasn't allowed to shoot because he was shooting over the bunker, and I told him he wasn't allowed to shoot, and he helped get the two medevacs on board, and we took off and got back to Marble Mountain Battalion Aid Station and saved those two guys' lives. And that was the gist of it, because they didn't think they were going to be able to get in, and I said I could do it. Yeah. And of course, I got chewed out by my commanding officer and by my flight lead said, "You weren't supposed to do that." And I said, well, I did it because it was the right thing to do, and we saved those two guys. So that was the meat and potatoes of the Silver Star.
One of the most overused words in language today is the word courage. You always hear people, well, they say a certain actor has courage, or they say a football player has courage. But in combat, it's my experience, sometimes the most unlikely people do the most courageous things. What does it take for someone to be courageous in a situation like you've described, or in the countless situations that happen?
Well, good question. The problem with courage is that you can't go to the grocery store and take it off the shelf and give it to yourself. I think it's a combination of your values, and that when necessary, you, through the help of God or an angel or whatever, will be able to do what's necessary to help another person. And usually courage is sacrificing yourself literally and figuratively to help someone else. And that's why the Congressional Medal of Honor is that, because usually that's awarded posthumously because the person gave up his life to save others. And that's so courage is a value of that you can't measure. And like you say, people don't intentionally go out to be courageous. They just do it because it was the right thing to do at the right time, and they had the skill within them. Maybe they didn't even have the skill, but they did what it took to get to save someone's life, and that's what they're talking about, I think, George.
And there's been some training too,
And training,
and the expectation, and it's always as people will tell you, anybody, I think, who's ever served in any combat situation, they will always say, we're not fighting for an ideology, we're not fighting for any political reason, we're fighting for
each other. Yeah.
That's exactly what you do.
The team.
Tell me about going home finally.
Going home, well, I came to Memphis and discovered that Memphis could care less about what was happening in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Fortunately for my brother, I had an ear to his group sessions on how they were dealing with their PTSD. It was shock. God, what was in World War II? It was called
Shell shock.
Shell shock.
Yeah.
And then I think Korean War, they called it something else, but in our case, they determined, and I think in
combat stress or
yes,
something
sir.
like that. Yeah.
Well, now they describe it as PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's a combination of things. And these guys, the one case makes sense to me when you got two people in a foxhole. If you got two people in a foxhole, for example, is the best way I think to describe this. One guy has reared with Christian values, and the other guy really wasn't. And the guy with Christian values gets killed, and the other guy feels bad that he should have been killed and not the other guy, and that's not necessarily the case. But the point is that he felt bad. There's a term for it also, where you don't die and your friend does, and that
survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And that allows, I think, guys to get in that PTSD where they're very frustrated at themselves and at the world, and they just need someone to help them help themselves. They don't want to, they're tough. They don't want to be helped. They need help, but they don't want to help. They want to be able to do it themselves. So the VA hospital, I think, was trying to do a good job in having these group gatherings and sharing issues. But what you've got to do is get help to help yourself, and getting guys to pull up their dadgum britches and go solve issues. Even things they have no control, they got to realize they have no control over. Right? Does that make sense, George?
Yes. I want to talk some more about that, but I don't want to overlook the fact that you came back home after Vietnam the first time, and you switched over to jets.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, as you said earlier, it's better to be the shooter as opposed to being the shootee.
Well, getting back into the country, I was hoping I would get in an A4. It's a close air support subsonic airplane. Hoping that I would get back up in the Northern I Corps, since I flew helicopters up there, and I could hardly wait. Well, they took us down and put us down into just outside Saigon in a place called Bien Hoa. Now, the difference of a jet pilot, back to my original jet pilot versus helicopter pilots, those guys didn't fly at night. Those guys had big revetments like we had. The planes were taken care of. But every night, they went to a major chow hall. The chow hall, kitchen in the middle, enlisted on one side, probably handle 200 people, and officers on the other side probably handle 150 to 100. And we had live music every night. The live music from the Philippines. The Filipinos are great mimickers. They could sound like anybody. You want to sound like James Brown at the time, or anybody, they could sound like them. And so you'd eat and drink and go to bed and get ready for your missions the next day.
This was not the Vietnam you left the first time.
This is not the Vietnam I left. But what was interesting is that when you went to fly a mission, a section would go in close air support, and you're at 10,000 feet, 250 knots, going around. You got a forward air controller, just like you would have a forward air controller on the ground in helicopters. trying to guide you into where the medevacs were. This forward air controller was airborne and trying to show you where to put your bombs, because he says that's the bad guys, and far be it from us. So the way you do this is you fly in a big circle, 10,000 feet. You get all the information you want. You want to find out where the enemy is firing from so that you could adjust your run-in and your pull-off so you're not pulling off over them. The way a jet works, flying, you roll from, about 135 degrees, almost upside down, and you're 250 knots, but the key you got to get to is 450 miles an hour, 3,000 feet off the ground, and 15 to 20 degrees nose pitch. And you just have, back to bungee cords, and nowadays they have instrumentation that tells you when your speed and when to drop the bomb so that it can get where it's supposed to go. And those were iron bombs, 500-pound bombs. So you hit that point, pickle, pause, pull, you pull 3 Gs, 4 Gs, then look to see where it was going to hit. And if it didn't hit where it was supposed to, your wingman would come down and adjust from there. So the second time, and this one I'm thinking about, the guy said, "You guys are doing terrific." I said, "We love doing this." He said, "We're going 500 knots. We're not doing 0 like helicopter pilots." So I came down this time, and he says, "You're taking fire." I said, "I can see I'm taking fire." You can, in the North Vietnamese and the Russians and the Chinese and the U.S., every 5th bullet's a tracer. So they can see where their rounds are impacting. So if you're going 500 knots and this thing's going 3,000 feet a second, whatever it goes, it's going by, you know it. But I said, even if I get hit, I can eject and you're going to take care of me. I can't do that with helicopters. Yeah. So the long and short of it is that flying jets and dropping bombs was not as rewarding as flying medevacs, because you were saving lives. You were saving lives in a different way by killing the enemy, based on what the information you got.
So there wasn't that much technology inside the cockpit even then?
No, not in the A4s back then, no sir.
So how long were you in Vietnam in the second tour?
8 months.
8 months.
13 months the first tour, 8 months the second.
Okay. And then you came back home. You had a family by this point?
Yes, sir.
And how difficult was it to transition after the second time? How long was it between the 2 tours?
67, 68, and then 71, so 3 years. Mm-hmm. And it was a struggle. I got divorced because she suggested that it was her or the Marine Corps, and flying in the Marine Corps was as best as I've ever done, and I didn't want to give that up for her.
What do you mean the best you've ever done?
At the time, I mean, flying jets in the Marine Corps, flying helicopters in the Marine Corps. Was as exciting as a young man at that age could do. I mean, other than going to the moon on a rocket, I guess. I don't know what John Glenn's feelings were, but I know that for me, and we have rendezvous in the helicopters every other year. There's an organization called Papa Smoke, and we've been doing this since probably 85. 82, 85, somewhere in there, were helicopter people, corpsmen, doctors, helicopter pilots, enlisted people that flew, get together at various cities, Dallas, Pensacola, Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, and we have a couple, 3 days, and you're with your squadron, but you get to see these guys and hug each other and realize all the bad stuff you felt when you originally came back. These guys had to go through it too, and they're surviving, and most of them are very successful. Very few of them turn out, the guys that I'm talking we see at these rendezvous, very few of them have gone over the deep end.
But the guys that you served with, in many cases, got experiences that can't be replicated.
No.
Any other way. We just have a couple of minutes left, so I want to ask you how. It seems like there's a lot more respect for people in the military now than there was.
It's turning
then.
the corner again. I think it's turning the corner again, and it's because of the thing. I think it's because there's 4 of us right now that are retired from FedEx that have been friends for 50 years. And they help charitable organizations. Each one has different charitable organizations they support, and they because of their getting out with the public, people see that these guys were military. Now, not all of them stayed in the Marine Corps like I did. I stayed in 21 years. Most of them got out, but these people have been successful in their businesses because of the discipline and what the Marine Corps, I think, the values they gave them, we earned.
And you see people, the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. It just seems to be a whole lot more acknowledgement.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think it's turning the corners because that's what's happening with the NFL. People say, "Hey, wait a second, you want to put your fist up and you want to kneel down? You're doing it at the wrong venue. You're disrespecting the flag. You're able to do what you do because guys went out and did that." And I don't mean to get on that subject, but most of the military guys that I know don't watch football anymore and don't go to the games.
Yeah. How do you think the Vietnam veteran has been treated in the media, television, movies? We only got a couple of minutes, but just your thoughts about over these past 50 years.
Well, I think the Burns thing that just came out, that documentary, was very skewed negatively against the military. It's like I was telling you that a lot of people thought there was a lot of drugs. There may have been, but not any place that I saw.
Right.
And drugs, military, if there's 10% of the population or 15% of the population that's in drugs, guess what? The military is going to have at least that same kind of cut. So we're making America great again because we're holding people accountable for their choices. And there's bad choices, then you make bad choices. Then you've got to pay the piper, so to speak. Yeah. Does that make sense, George?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right, we got to wrap it up. I really appreciate you being here. And I want to say to our audience, if you know someone who is a Vietnam veteran who might be interested in appearing on our show, you'll see something at the bottom of the screen throughout the show that tells you how to get in touch with us. And we'd love to have a conversation with you about it. We're looking for people who have all kinds of experiences. We appreciate Rick Rivers being here today. He's a wonderful guest with a different point of view on Vietnam than we've heard before. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.